Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Insectoids among us. Remember the sudden urge by activists to change people's diet to consume bugs? It's an insectoid conspiracy, so we start mass manufacturing food sources for them and special habitats for their reproduction, so the eventual invasion goes smoothly.
I imagine that this will be how the insectoid species will gain the upper hand. The insectoids will have a better time digesting insects while everyone else will start having health issues. Eventually, the insectoid race will outbreed everyone and be the only ones alive.
All that I remember was waking up mid-abduction. Imagine that you wake up from sleeping after a night of drinking, and you don't remember where you were before. You just see where you are now. That's exactly how it happened. I woke up standing in my own hallway in my trailer home. I was overwhelmed with the emotion of fear, but I did not know why or what was happening. My body was mostly paralyzed and frozen in place while I was standing. I looked at my feet and then my hands, and I noticed that my hands were on the side of a door in my hallway, with my fingers clutched to the side of the door, as if I was being pulled from behind. I turned my head around slowly, and I saw this guy who was my height, maybe just a few inches taller than me. I was 12 years old at the time and living near Santa Fe, New Mexico. He had a huge head that looked like a praying mantis's head. He had two humongous eyes. I couldn't see a mouth or nose or anything like that I remember. He didn't have ears, just a huge white head and huge eyes. He was wearing a black cloak, not tight-fitting, and he had his hands outstretched like he was trying to grab me. He had 3 fingers on each hand, possibly 4, but definitely not 5. His fingers seemed weird and he moved very little. As soon as I locked eyes with this person, it felt like someone punched me. As soon as my eyes locked with his, I became more paralyzed, and I began to forget what was happening. I looked away as fast as I could and then never looked back for about an hour. After I turned my back to him, he was standing in between me and my room. I was standing between him and the kitchen. We were both standing in a very narrow hallway in my trailer home. My fingers were clutched against the railing of a door that we lovingly called the middle room of our home. I could feel myself being pulled back by what felt like a strong magnetic force, like being pushed back by the wind. I could fight it. It wasn't a lost cause. I could struggle. As soon as I stopped looking at him, my memory slowly started to come back. I thought, where am I, and why am I here? I was full of fear, and I looked down at my feet. I could tell that I was trying to run away from this guy. And then I began hearing thoughts in my head saying, come this way. I considered going to the guy. I didn't know if I was running away from him or if I was running to him. That's how quick and intense I forgot everything in that second. I looked at my legs though and could tell that I was trying to run away. I could feel my body filled with overwhelming fear. And then it slowly occurred to me that if I'm afraid and running away, this must be bad. This must be a bad person. And then I had this overwhelming, gut-wrenching feeling that this was not the first time I saw this guy. I had a feeling that I had seen this guy several times before in trips that he made me forget. It was weird. A catch-22 philosophical experiment. I felt like I had agreed to this experiment. Like we had had this discussion before. That he could talk to me and I could go on trips with him, but only if I agreed to have my memory wiped every time. But these were not good experiences. I was so filled with terror that I knew this had to be bad. I thought maybe it was a dream. I tried so hard to wake up. I desperately wanted to wake up. It was at that moment that I realized that I had fallen asleep inside the middle room and not in my bedroom that day. I thought, maybe if I can pull myself back into the middle room, I can find my body lying there, and I can jump back into my body and kind of like, wake up. I struggled for more than 30 minutes. My fingers were aching and my legs were hurting. It did not feel like sand and I did not have weakness. I had my full strength and was struggling the entire time there. I was slowly finally able to pull myself maybe 6 inches closer and was able to pull my body into the door frame. To my shock, my body was not lying there. I kept pulling myself forward down the hallway and grabbed the side of my kitchen refrigerator. It is at the end of the hallway going into the kitchen. I grabbed it desperately and kept pulling forward. After a short while, I became overwhelmed with fear. I began screaming at the guy behind me. I didn't look into his eyes, but I screamed at him. I begged him. I pleaded and cried and screamed and begged for my life. I was a slobbering mess and begged him to please stop torturing me. My fear and pain slowly turned to anger. I began disparaging the guy. I said, "Why are you doing this to me?" I demanded that he leave me alone. I said things like, "What gives you the right to do this to people?" I asked if he thought I was some kind of animal, or that I didn't have emotions and free will. Those are not all the exact words. I spoke in a combination of screamed words and thoughts, but it was mostly thoughts that were experienced. He only spoke back to me in thoughts. As I waited there, he stood emotionless and didn't say anything for a very long time. I didn't know if he was trying to save me or if he was trying to hurt me. I still don't. After maybe an hour more of struggling, I pulled myself into the kitchen and could see the front door wide open in front of me. I don't remember if I saw people outside or not. I can't remember exactly anything beyond this. It was at that moment that I surrendered my body. I gave up, and I hoped to not remember any pain. The next thing I knew, I woke up in the bed in the middle room. I remember waking up first, and then only after several seconds passed did I open my eyes. I pretended that I didn't remember anything. I walked slowly out of the room and said out loud, "What a weird dream." I went to the windows and looked outside and couldn't find anyone or anything nearby. I stared at the sun coming through the blinds for a long time and could almost feel the guy still in the hallway there. I slowly went back to bed and pretended like nothing happened. When I woke up again, I just kept on like nothing happened.
You can really throw anything at a wall and have it stick, it seems. On one side, you got a conspiracy that we have reptilian/insectoid/not-human overlords who, so far, have incorporated a human diet just fine to keep up appearances, but now, suddenly, we're going to be force-fed disgusting bugs. Look how disgusting they are, all small and weird-looking and shit. The other side is that, on a planet with billions of people, and billions more being born in the coming decades, we need alternate food sources. There are varieties of bugs that, when heavily processed, like the discount hamburger meat you've probably eaten 500 times, provide a reliable nutrition source with much less space requirement compared to traditional farming. I know there's going to be an influx of photo replies and name-calling without any actual discourse, probably, but to truly investigate the paranormal, you have to filter what you accept, or you risk, well, getting to this point.
Okay, my solution is to first cull that population. A few well-placed nukes should take care of it.
My two friends and I had just finished our supper and were out on the porch talking and drinking. One of my friends had gone into the kitchen for a quick refill, whilst I and my other friend remained outside. After a moment of silence, my friend pointed out an unusually bright star moving across the sky, assuming it may have been a comet or something. After a brief moment, I looked up at it again to realize that it was stationary, around 75, 100 feet above the tree line. I sat there staring at this thing, just in complete shock. Every 15 seconds or so, it would lower its altitude until it was only a couple of feet from the treetops. The weirdest part about this is that absolutely no noise had been emitted thus far. I tried to get out of my chair to hurry inside, but I felt an overwhelming feeling of paralysis, as did my friend. I turned to him and asked him what was going on, but he looked frozen in fear. After what felt like hours, something appeared from around the trees underneath the triangular craft. It was a humanoid figure, with a head similar to that of an ant and skin like a crocodile. It had extremely small eyes in proportion to its head, and long, thin appendages. It walked right up to the fence, before sharply turning and sprinting into the darkness of the trees. After a brief moment of complete fear, dread, and anxiousness, the craft moved in a linear path towards the west before becoming no longer visible.
Be me, out in the burbs of southern Louisiana. Mardi Gras time, so almost everyone save for the older people and young children were out partying, was chilling in the living room, trying to wind down after a rather hectic day through the city. Traffic is horrible that time of year. Saw a bright flash followed by a loud boom in the backyard. I thought it was lightning at first, but I remembered it hadn't rained in days. Went out to see what happened. Saw a purple saucer dish-shaped object near what remained of the fence that separated our house from the canal. It was rather small, about 6 feet in diameter, with small glowing red and green lights all around the hull. It appeared to be leaking a fluorescent blue liquid. A small hatch opened at the top. 2 to 3 small creatures climbed out. They were small, only around 6 inches tall, looked almost cartoonish in proportions. It had a stubby cylindrical head, a fat square body, 4 spindly legs, and little atrophied wings. After that, everything's kind of blurry.
I was solo backpacking in the area, and I'm extremely familiar with the Mount Dana area. I wanted to test some new gear before a more serious backpacking trip. It was about 5 p.m., and I was at around 7,000 plus feet on a ridge with a very breathtaking and interesting outcropping. The stone was very geometric, and when you knocked on it, rang like a hollow storage tank. I kept some pieces of the rock because I found them interesting. As I'm putting the rocks, I picked into my backpack for the hike down to a spot I had selected earlier for camp. I hear a fluttering noise, not unlike a pigeon landing. I turn my head quickly, but without much thought, to see the bird, and what I see instead is a huge praying mantis. This mantis was at least 5 feet long. It stood erect, and its abdomen was curved to a very extreme angle, allowing it to stand roughly chest height to me. In some respects, it looked and acted human-like. I was crouched down so the thing was eye level. It grabbed a piece of food I had been eating and stared at me as it ate it. Then its wings popped out and it flew off. I felt extremely nauseous and had a bad migraine afterward. I chalk it up to dehydration and a migraine, but the memory is so real.
In a state between asleep and waking up, I opened my gritty eyes into slits. Being comfortable in my room setting, I let my eyes trail around the edges of towels and coats hung on doors. It was then that on the ruff of fur around my coat's hood, I began to see insectoid limbs and delicate brown mottled appendages gently retracting and waving from black anomalies on the white wall. Unperturbed but curious, I watched them silently from the folds of my duvet. I then saw 4 or 5, or maybe even more distinct praying mantis-like insects in the same mottled, delicate brown pattern, all tightly clustered on the underside of my hood, moving with the same slow, measured movements. Exactly how insects sometimes swarm or gather in groups and share their company intimately, but alien-like. They were not vivid. They had a subdued, dark shine to their carapaces and fixed positions. A few even crawled away from the main group. Still not scared, but extremely curious about these new, distinctly alien beings, I walked up to them and saw them rustle in anticipation, and could see they were very guarded and conscious of this new observer. I reached out to touch the wing case of one, and they melted like sped-up decomposing vegetation. Does anyone know why insects often play a big part in, I suppose, fairy shit, but also alien stuff? I live in the UK, so there are no big insects here. Also have been having reoccurring dreams about this clear sunlit river, thick with water crowfoot and many bees in the air.
I'm a mail carrier in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Folks here are spread out over long distances and they still need to get their mail, so every day I take a long drive out through the desert to deliver mail to the residents. In February 2023, I was out by the Valles Caldera National Preserve, and I blew a tire. It was late afternoon, and it was going to be dark soon. The desert gets really cold at night year-round. Even worse, cell phone service is spotty around here. My reception was nil. My only options were to wait for a car to pass and hope they were willing to help. I could also hike up the hill and try to get a signal. Eventually, after I didn't report back, the post office would send somebody out to find me along the highway, but that could literally take hours, and I didn't want to spend the night out here alone. I chose to hike. I could probably make it up and back just before dark. I just hoped that I would get a signal once up top. I was about halfway up the hill when I decided to take a short rest and a water break. I was sitting on a rock and taking a few sips from the bottle when I heard some odd sounds. It was like loud chattering. It reminded me of cicadas that I remembered when living in the eastern US. It seemed like it was coming from behind a rocky outcropping directly in the path. I didn't see any other route, so I decided to just move slowly and see what it was. As I began to walk, I stepped on a loose rock and lost my footing. I slid down a few feet before catching myself. The chattering stopped, and I noticed something move out from behind a boulder. I saw a 6-foot-tall, thin insectoid with the head of a grasshopper. It had 2 large antennas on its head and a pair of large pincers extending from its thorax. There was another smaller pair of pincers beneath that. It moved quickly left and then right and then left again, stopping 20 feet away. It was horrible. I didn't know if running and standing my ground was the best option, but after I took another look at its pincers, I decided on the former. I slowly backed away, mimicking its movements. It stood still as it watched me. Then my cell phone began to ring loudly. The creature's antenna snapped to attention and it quickly ran down the hillside. I instantly ran in the opposite direction, stumbling and falling as I moved. I eventually reached the bottom of the hill near the roadside, not far from my mail truck. I hopped into the truck and stayed put, hoping that the creature would stay away from me. I did catch a glimpse of the creature as it moved around the hill. I stayed put in the truck for several hours, not daring to leave its safety. After what seemed like forever, a car came along and gave me a lift back into town.
I've been getting a lot of signals from an insectoid being lately. She does not look so humanoid as pick-related, but more like a 4D centipede that lives in a cocoon composed of many complex layers of itself. In our communications, we were talking about Earth, the future of humanity, simulations, the common human fear of insects, and more. The way she talked to me was like a direct side-circuit patch into my meditative consciousness. It's as if she was feeling this world through me. I was a sort of temporary drone, and I was seeing her through a network of ethereal mirrors that she can direct and align with her natural radio signal emissions. She said that there are numerous timelines from this point forward of Earth being irradiated to a point of no return for human surface dwelling due to a variety of celestial and human events. She said that the various hive queens of insects around Earth are extremely intelligent and can possess a human consciousness at any time, but they never do so without consent, out of politeness and a respect for natural order. She said the way human leaders have scrambled the average human's senses with radio waves is disruptive in ways most humans aren't cognizant of. In the same way, she showed me herself with a mirror configuration that interacts with my sparking neurons. So too can human leaders project entire photonic overlays into the reality of humans, leading us to believe nearly anything when they do so during wake states. Basically, she was kinda showing me to be aware of my radio signals, and it was pretty neat. Anyone else friends with arthropod-type entities or have experiences with any?
The one I found was rather hostile, logical, cold, and eerie. It showed me a cave with cannibalism and murder. It was never openly hostile, and it did not communicate in words. I think it was proposed means some sort of alliance, but I walked back as soon as I saw the mating cave.
I witnessed an alien abduction back in 2002 when I was 14. A friend of mine wanted me to help her grandparents set up their computer. I said sure and rode my bicycle to their house. I get there and clouds appear, so I decide to make this pretty quick. I set up the computer and installed some software for them, showing them all how it works and such. They go back and sit on the couch while I get my backpack to get ready to leave, as their other granddaughter, who is about 6 years old, was sleeping in the other room. All of a sudden, a cold breeze went through the room. It was odd as all the doors and windows were shut. The grandparents looked toward the kitchen, and what I saw made me freeze in place. There were 3 creatures standing in the kitchen. 2 of them were short, gray alien creatures with thicker necks than usually described, with the eyes closer to the sides of their heads. They wore silver jumpsuits. In between them was a taller creature that looked like a humanoid mantis wearing a black robe with a yellow stripe going down the middle. They walked to another room and a minute later returned with the robed creature carrying the kid in its arms. It's looking at me and I get the feeling it knows who I am. I don't know why I got the feeling, but I did. I was very scared. The grandparents were looking at them too, but not doing anything. I thought, screw this, and fought off all the fear I could and clumsily charged toward them. I didn't even make 3 steps before the grandfather stopped me and told me they will bring her back. The creatures didn't move and continued to look at me. I couldn't get any more words out of my throat because I didn't even know what to think at this point. All of a sudden, a light stretched around them, and they vanished. An odd glow remained for a few seconds before fading. After a minute of awkward silence and the grandfather repeating, "She will be brought back soon," I decided to leave. I rode my bicycle back home as fast as I could while looking back, hoping that nothing was following me. I didn't sleep that night after I got home. The next day I told my friend what happened, and she told me it has happened before. The grandparents and other family members have tried to stop it, but to no avail. They just accepted it with a look of defeat and moved on. The kid was brought back after a few hours. Not long after I witnessed this incident, their whole family moved elsewhere. I've heard from other people who claim to experience similar events, and I feel they are legit.
I live in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. I was asked by my mother's friend to move some stuff to a storage unit nearby. I had not been working because of the plague, and the pay was okay, so I went ahead and agreed. It was raining all day off and on, but at times it got so heavy that I couldn't transfer boxes from my car to the unit. So I just get comfortable inside the unit and listen to some music while I wait for the rain to clear up. It's cozy in there, to be honest, and the rain just keeps getting worse. It's not very cold out, though. I'm just chilling when I start hearing this banging noise from nearby. It sounds like something hitting metal at first. I think that maybe there was a car accident on the nearby highway, North Lincoln Ave, Highway 41. But then I realized it was coming from the other direction, and I really don't want to go outside and get wet. I tell myself that someone probably dropped something, like nothing serious. But I continue hearing various banging noises. I still didn't bother checking. But as it continued, I decided to check it out since the rain had let up a bit. I walk outside and turn the corner and see this massive hole in the fence leading to a little wooded area at the North Shore Channel Trail. I see this white thing moving near and under the dumpster by the fence. I'm thinking that it was a large white garbage trash bag, but it just doesn't look right. I'm confused and I'm trying to get like a closer look at the thing. I may be about 100 feet or so away from it and I see something sticking out of it, and it's making a clicking sound. I say, "Hello, who's that?" I immediately regret yelling this out. Something big squeezes out from underneath the dumpster. It looks like a pile of fleshy tissue with spike-like protrusions. It stands 4 feet tall, but then it extends up to over 6 feet. It looks like a humanoid spider or other insect, but with white flesh. It doesn't have an exoskeleton, just smooth white flesh. The head is weird, kind of insect-like with no mouth that I could see. The eyes were human-like and had a reddish glow. It had long slits along the side of its head. It stood there clicking and watching me. I could sense that it didn't want me there. I was wondering why I was still there and hadn't run off. I had heard about the Chicago Mothman and was wondering if this may have been it, but it didn't resemble anything that I had ever heard about. Then I felt a sudden rush of calm come over me and I was able to break the trance I was in. I hauled ass back to the storage unit, locked it up, got into my car and quickly left. When I looked back in the direction of the creature, it was gone. I returned the next day and finished unloading the boxes from the car as fast as I could.
I have terrible memories from my youth, indistinguishable from dreams that make me question daily reality. Being in a transport terminal of some kind, an airport maybe, everyone but my parents were grotesque sludge-like insectoid aliens, like close-ups of microbiology in human proportions. Terrified, I looked at my parents. They were the same but told me everything would be okay as I screamed. I used to mimic the sound of the crowds in town and try to talk as if I was everyone talking at once. My mother would become scared and distressed and yell at me to stop. One time I told my aunt that when I closed my eyes I could still see everything in many different screens or boxes, alternate versions of experience. When I opened my eyes, I zoomed in on different views and things would change. Aunt got worried, called a number. I was vanned and taken away. Used my perspective shift to go back to a view where I told her nothing. Memories of CT scans that supposedly never happened. Memories of painful injections in the back of the neck. Astral projection from an early age. Visitations by entities in my sleep. Worst of all, a terrifyingly vivid memory of being dragged through dingy, wet corridors covered in pipes and wiring and tubes by heavily armed and armored soldiers in all black to a pillar of upright sarcophagi like pods, being strapped in, enclosed. Doctor in white lab coat with long black shiny gloves inserts tubes, issues injection, is goading me, telling me to get ready for a nice long sleep. I tell him he'll never get away with this. He laughs and fits apparatus over my face before everything goes black, and then back to normality. I've woken up in there numerous times, completely sealed in this machine, unable to move while the DR runs checkups. Anyone share any similar experiences or memories? What has happened or is happening to me?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.